The mist bloomed and flowed as the delicious strength of dark magic crashed over Sombra. The pain faded to a dull burn, and the lethargy was placed with vigor and strength. Sombra lit his horn and took a deep breath of the magic flowing off of Fluttershy, just like the Wendigos all those centuries ago. Sombra could practically taste the power. It flowed through his crippled body and washed away the weakness that had taken up residence in him. A week ago, he would have been thrilled with such a turn of events. One entrusted to hold a fragment of an ancient artifact of light magic has succumbed to a powerful darkness. Not only did it eliminate one of the only things capable of harming him, the end result was restoring him to his old strength faster than he could have imagined. Yes, he should have been excited. Instead, he was filled with terror. "Fluttershy!" Sombra cried out as the buttercream Pegasus staggered in place. Her eyes blazed with unwholesome green and red light. Dark mist flowed from her eyes. "Fluttershy, I need you to concentrate." I can't." Fluttershy's face twisted into a grimace rictus. "It feels incredible, Your Majesty. The strength, the power. I didn't know. How could anyone give up this feeling?" "Because it comes with a price of madness, my dear." Sombra answered angrily, staggering closer to his, servant? No, she was much more than that. "You cannot permit the magic to poison you. It will destroy everything, starting with your home and ending with you, assuming somebody else doesn't deal with you first." But you'll protect me, right?" Fluttershy looked up shakily from where she stood in front of her cottage. "You'll keep me safe?" Sombra was beginning to deeply regret lifting the guise from Fluttershy's mind. If it was still in place, he could be able to subdue her easily. Now, though, her mind was too chaotic to risk trying to implant a new mnemonic. "Yes, I will," Sombra answered truthfully. "Right up until the moment you destroy me in a fit of dark magic-induced madness. It will happen. You've grown far, far too powerful too quickly." For the first time since the darkness claimed her, Sombra saw Fluttershy's face spasm into a semblance of normality. It lasted only a second, but it was clear she was fighting it. After several seconds, she grimaced, her brow furrowing as if she was in great pain. "What do I do, Your Majesty?" "You need to let me in." Sombra's voice took on an echoing, dreamlike quality. "There's a fragment of power, ancient magic within you. It chose you to bear it because of the great kindness within your heart. That same kindness has now driven you to a place of hatred, though. It's hemorrhaging power into you now because it's confused. Dark and light are trying to coexist, and the colonization is currying surges of chaotic power." How do I... Fluttershy croaked, her voice strained and thready. "Please, help me." Approaching Fluttershy was like striding through a maelstrom. The power was tearing at Sombra's body and soul alike. It whispered and coveted, like always, but unlike Fluttershy, Sombra was no novice. He had submerged himself in the shadows for centuries. True, he had been protected by his creation for most of that, but sheer formality with the power that now surrounded him ensured him to its worst effects. No, he had long ago mastered his emotions enough to wield his magic in relative safety, so long as he didn't use anything too strong for too long. Fluttershy had no such benefit, though, and the overflow of dark magic was eating away at her psyche. If he didn't stop the surges soon, there would likely be little more than a paranoid schizophrenic mess left behind. "I'm going to enter your mind." Sombra's voice boomed serenely from within the dark storm of power that was beginning to black out the Everfree that stood near. "You will feel pressure at the edge of your consciousness. Do not resist it. Do you understand me, my dear?" Fluttershy cried out in pain as another wave of darkness tore out from her body. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, but between them she managed to respond. As you say, Your Majesty." Lighting his horn, Sombra mused on the fact that, for the first time since he was awake, he had absolutely no lack of power, and his very first action would be to try and seal off the wellspring that was delivering it to him. "What delightful irony," Sombra chuckled angrily. "Fate truly makes a fool of us all." Sombra finally reached Fluttershy. The pressure was impossibly powerful. It was almost all Sombra could do to resist drinking in the pure, unfiltered darkness around him. It would be the height of idiocy, though. He was powerful, true, but the amount of dark magic would drive anyone to insanity. Leaning forward, he touched his curved horn to Fluttershy's forehead. He could feel her trembling. "Everything will be all right," Sombra whispered softly. "I promise." With some satisfaction, he felt Fluttershy nod. A burst of crimson light followed, and he felt a surge of spinning vertigo as he plunged headlong into the storm surrounding her mind. However bad it had been on the outside, the maelstrom of darkness was an order of magnitude worse on the inside. Sombra scowled as his astral form was torn at by ravenous clawed winds. Lemurs, the semi-conscious spiritual dredge of the darkness, with their spiteful claws and envious teeth, were nothing but mindless hunger. They were not a danger, so much as annoyance, though. The thought that there were some sorcerers out there desperate enough to imbue with the insane little devils into mounds of alchemy-grown flesh on a source of cannon fodder disgusted Sombra. No, it was the larger predators that Sombra was concerned with, the shadowy leviathans that drifted on the tides of darkness, sentient storms of negative emotion, hatred, rage, terror, despair. If he was not quick, then Fluttershy would attract one of those horrors to her, and would devour her mind. Spreading ethereal wings shaped like the leathery appendages of a dragon, Sombra tore through the morass of Lemurs. He could feel Fluttershy's mind at the center of the storm, a beacon of light in the shadow. Unfortunately, Sombra knew that if he could sense it, then anything else within reach would be able to as well. Heedless of the damage he knew he was inflicting on himself, Sombra tore through the storm wall surrounding Fluttershy's soul. He winced at the razor-edge pain that laced through him. He couldn't afford to let it weaken him, though, and with an effort of will, he shuttered the damage to his physical form. Sombra knew he was going to be in terrible condition when he emerged from the little venture, but letting the little blighters carve away at his astral form would slow him down. Haste was the order of the day, and he meant he would just have to weather the pain. Maybe not just weather it, actually, Sombra thought suddenly. I haven't been strong enough to do this until now, but... As he cut through the storm wall, Sombra concentrated, seeking out the cooling pool of pure energy that was his magic, the wellspring from which all of his power flowed. Reaching toward it, he called out the construct he knew was still submerged within. "Vavutas. Your services are required." Sombra's mind thundered. Without hesitation, the pool seemed to explode from within. In front of him, a crimson coil of energy bled out a cut in the air and slowly congealed into the shape of a brutal warhammer. Vavistas. Suffering of the conquered. Sombra's personal weapon, and the tool with which he forged an empire and broke a house of nobles thousands of years ago. It was a weapon that in his own time had nearly been as feared as he was himself. This was merely a projection of it, of course. The true weapon still lay at rest in a hidden place in the empire. He could feel the weapon's power and it echo in the wail. It had not yet been found. Not that he was surprised. It was in a place that nobody would expect to find something of such importance. Seizing the incarnate artifact with his mind, Sombra gave it a hard swing in front of him. He felt the sadistic spirits of the storm shatter under a malicious blow. They were no match for him, especially now. The wind split before him as if they were a mere breeze. He felt Fluttershy's mind much more clearly now. Nothing would stand in his way. He would reach his mare. Fluttershy shivered in the cold, empty dark. She was surrounded by howling, endless howling. That wasn't the worst part, though. Though the wind and storm, Fluttershy could hear the chattering voices of the ones who had betrayed her. Twilight, pedantic and conceiting, so sure that she knew every stupid answer, no matter that it was one of her best friends asking for her trust. No, that wasn't good enough. She was a princess now. She knew what was best, and Celeste to help anyone who thinks otherwise. So the lavender pinhead could put an Ursa Minor to sleep. Good for her. 2 bad majors are practically immune to magic. His cave wasn't so far away, either. Then there was Rarity, conniving and insecure Rarity with their fake accent of hers. Anyone who knew her parents knew she was from Minneapolis. Siding against her and Sombra for what? Because she had a few bad dreams? Ha! She should relocate a nest of Tartarus wasps and make a few of those bad dreams come true. And Applejack. Dumb, dirt-grubbing, down-home twanging Applejack. Every problem has some contrived countryism to go along with it. Snakes and scales, snakes and scales. She'd show Applejack snakes and scales. Maybe she'll drop a basilisk on the Orange Root's barn. She knew where one slept, deep in the air, free. Let's see what her thought of snakes and scales when her family became digested. No! Fluttershy cried out. The thoughts were digging into her mind like venomous barbs. She tried to ignore the horrible thoughts that followed every voice, but nothing seemed to help. Please stop. I don't want to hurt them like that. I never wanted anything like that. Are you so certain, sweetling? A slithering whisper like jagged razors on concrete scattered into her mind. Fluttershy curled in on herself and screamed, trying to drown out its voice with her own. It didn't help. We can feel your rage. We can feel your hatred. The voice was so close to her now. At least, it felt like it was. Was it in her mind? Fluttershy opened her eyes. She was staring into a mirror. A perfect smile of her stared back, right? It was her, right? No, there was something wrong. Her eyes were blue, right? Not black. Not dripping tears of pitch and filled with pinpricks of red light. And her teeth? Weren't they straighter than that? Weren't they rounded teeth like a herbivore? She certainly didn't recall them being razor thin and yet knife-like, dripping with vicious red— No! Fluttershy turned and bucked at the mirror. She felt the glass shatter, but the image burned into her mind. All around her, Fluttershy saw the horrible thing that wore her skin. She was surrounded. It was moving toward her with unpleasant, hitchy strides, like its bones didn't fit right under the flesh and muscle that had pulled on like a cheap suit. Do not fear us, for we are released from pain, from suffering. You are released from sanity and nothing more. A deep voice tore through the thick mental miasma that was closing in on Fluttershy as 4 thundering hoofbeats slammed down around her. Begone, demon, and do not let me catch you taunting this one again, or I shall be far less forgiving. The figure standing over her was a vision of blue and white flames caged in the form of a massive, familiar stallion. His curved horn shone like a lantern in the dark as burning, dramatic wings curved protectively around her. With a derisive snort, Sombra brandished a tremendous and ornate warhammer made of ethereal red light. The apparition that had been tormenting Fluttershy staggered back and let out a hiss like 1,000 cockroaches. Sombra didn't even flinch. Moving like lightning, he brought his hammer thundering into the moon's side, sending it flying away into the storm with a sickening visual crunch of bone and organs. It shrieked, was drowned out by the howl of its broken body breaching into the storm wall. Sombra? Fluttershy staggered to her feet, staring at the winged stallion in disbelief. You're not dead? He wore a sad expression. No, my dear, I'm afraid not. The reason for that is as fortunate as it is disturbing, but that can wait. We need to leave this place quickly, before another more dangerous entity decides to investigate this little maelstrom and— Whatever Sombra was about to say next didn't matter. For the first time, Fluttershy did not give one fluffy bunny tail about her actions as she practically tackled him to the ground. Before she could think it through, she pressed her lips to his, gripping him tightly with her hoofs as if she might vanish at any point. It only took Sombra a second to recover, and when he did, he wrapped himself around her, wings and all, and held her close. I'm glad. I'm so glad. Fluttershy cried out at the moment she pulled away from him. She clung to him, shaken and crying as all the tension and fear that had ribbled her from the moment she had woken up to find him on death's door flooded out of her on a wave of tears. I didn't want to lose you. I'm so sorry I failed you. I tried. I promise I tried. Sombra silenced her with another kiss, and Fluttershy felt her cheeks warm delightfully at his touch. I know you did, Sombra said softly as they parted. Their decision was neither your fault nor was entirely wrong. He lifted a hoof to cut off the incoming tirade. The princess made a judgment call based on the safety of her ponies. That is the burden of a ruler. She sentenced you to die! Fluttershy almost broke down again at the word. Twilight was just going to let you. I will debate this for as long as you want another day, but I'm afraid we don't have time to dally at the moment, my dear. Sombra cut her off, but his eyes were soft with concern all the same. We need to get out of here quickly. Where are we? Fluttershy asked timidly, glancing around the featureless island of calm in the darkness. I never imagined a place so awful. Fluttershy let out a weary breath. There are too many names, and none of them would mean a thing to you. Suffice to say, you have passed through well beyond the walls of sleep to reach this place, and are in great danger. You witnessed one of the more average denizens just now, but your soul is like a bonfire to the hungry creatures that dwell here, and will draw stronger and more terrible foes. What happened to me? Fluttershy met Sombra's gaze and saw the reluctance there. Sombra, my king, please answer me. You told me not long ago that you bore the element of kindness, yes? Sombra stated more than asked. You still hold the essence of that ancient power inside you, but nothing is ever as simple as light and dark. Kindness, loyalty, honesty, there is nothing that cannot be turned dark. When your friends forced you into a position that compromised your kindness, your elemental nature turned on itself. From what you told me before, you were put into a position where you have to choose between abandoning some pony in need and turning against your friends outright. There is no right answer as far as your kindness was concerned. So my element of harmony turned me dark? Fluttershy asked in disbelief. That flew in the face of everything she had ever been taught about harmony. There wasn't supposed to be a dark side to be kind and loyal and any of it. Sombra shrugged. In part, I suppose. I do not pretend to know the truth of the matter. These artifacts are beyond even my ken. They were ancient before the first foundations were laid for the Crystal Palace. It would take months of research, I suspect, before I could posit a theory that was more than guesswork. I see, Fluttershy answered softly, taking a deep breath. She did her best to push the panic away. Sombra was right. Now wasn't the time to deal with it. There was nothing to do about it at the moment anyway. Still, it wasn't all bad. But you're going to be okay. The deep, baritone chuckle that Fluttershy had gone to love answered as Sombra nodded. Yes, for the moment I'm going to be fine. I have restored a great deal of my magic. So long as I do not expend too much of it, I will have years, maybe decades, to determine a replacement source for my body to sustain itself. Or at the very least, I may be able to reverse the process. Fluttershy let out a tiny yay, and wrapped herself around Sombra's wide-barreled chest. It was odd, since his current form lacked his dark fur, but it was still Sombra. Whatever happened made it so you're not going to die, so I wouldn't change it for anything. Sombra pulled Fluttershy close, and she giggled as he felt him nuzzle into her soft pink mane. Let us remove ourselves from this place, then, my dear. Although I suspect we're far from out of the woods yet. Your display will have drawn a lot of attention, since you're releasing surges of dark magic like a geyser at the moment. Where can we go? Fluttershy asked, burying herself into Sombra's chest as the storm twisted around her. The others won't let you take me away, not without trying to stop you. I'm sure they'll think you're controlling me, or that you corrupted me. There was a small rumble from Sombra's chest as he chuckled. If anything, my dear, I fear you have corrupted me. Your little council seems to deeply underestimate your persuasive capabilities, it seems. A weak laugh escaped Fluttershy's lips. They'll try to take you away, won't they? Sombra nodded. They will, but they will also fail. Not all of my hideaways in the equestrian mainland have been destroyed. There are still a few places for us to go. Fluttershy smiled, pressing herself against her stallion's chest. I'll go where you go. If I may say, that seems like a rather crap idea, my dear, Sombra responded wryly. Fluttershy just quirked an eyebrow up and smiled back at him in a surprisingly sarcastic manner that reminded Sombra of Rainbow Dash more than anything. Well, according to a certain farm pony, I have crap taste in stallions. So I suppose I'll just have to live with that, Sombra stared in amusement, and even Fluttershy felt a little self-conscious at the casual cynicism that she had heard in her own voice. A part of her wondered if that was the dark magic talking, if it had eroded away so much of her timidity and speaking her mind. That may not be such a bad thing, Fluttershy mused, and for once her mind was silent on the matter. Turning toward the storm wall, she glanced over at Sombra, who had followed her gaze with his own, and nodded. Time to confront my friends, and whatever else is out there. Well, one thing is for certain, at least. Fluttershy leaned against Sombra for a moment, reveling in the comfort of his presence. I've made my choice.